Good afternoon. Good afternoon all, and welcome to this Oceanwide Expeditions webinar. I'm very happy to welcome you today for this session about Svalbard. My name is Franklin, and I will give you a short introduction about this session. But before I do so, I will introduce you to our speaker for today. Our speaker is Jan Belgers. Jan has been an expedition leader with us for many years now. He has a background in marine biology and has worked as a guide from the Himalayas to Spitsbergen and Antarctica, and has almost 30 years of experience with the polar regions. So no better person to tell you everything you need to know about Svalbard, to be able, of course, to make the perfect choice for your next trip. Now, as said, we will talk about Svalbard today, Svalbard or Spitsbergen, not exactly the same, but I will leave that to Jan to explain. But before I giving the words, I will tell you a little something about ourselves, about Oceanwide Expeditions. We have more than 25 years of experience in the polar regions. And one of the most important developments during all these years is the acquisition and building of our own fleet of ice-strengthened vessels, which is an important development, not only for the flexibility of adapting our program to customer demand, but also to increase our capacity, obviously. So talking about our fleet, we have 5 vessels now. The first one I will show you is the vessel you see right now, the sailing vessel Rembrandt van Rijn, which is has a maximum capacity of 33 passengers in 16 cabins. So ideal for groups, for example. All cabins obviously are equipped with shower and bathroom facilities. Important to know also is that the Rembrandt only sails in the Arctic region, so it doesn't sail in Antarctica. The second vessel I will show you is the Plancius. Plancius has a capacity of 108 passengers, so a bit bigger, 52 cabins. And the Plancius sails both in the Arctic and in Antarctica, which is exactly the same as the Ortelius, the vessel you can see right now, also 108 passengers, maximum capacity. You will see on this image that the Ortelius can carry helicopters, but this is not something we do in the Arctic. Helicopters are only used on specific trips in Antarctica, so it's not something that we will discuss during this session. Our next and fourth ship is the Hondius. Hondius started sailing only in 2019, is a newly built special for Oceanwide, and has a maximum capacity of 170 passengers, which is exactly the same as Jansonius, last ship, which is a sister vessel from Hondius. Well, actually, it's being built right now. So it will start sailing in November 21. Now, here you can have the overview of our fleet again. Rembrandt, Plancius, Ortelius, Hondius, and Jansonius. And if you were wondering why the name Plancius, Ortelius, Hondius, and Jansonius, all of them are famous cartographers. Now, where do we sail? We have 2 seasons. We have the Antarctic season, so we sail in Antarctica between November and March. A lot of possibilities over there. We have the Antarctic Peninsula, obviously. We have the combination of the Falklands, South Georgia, and the peninsula. Then we have a trip at the east side of the peninsula, the Weddell Sea, which is the trip where we go in search of the emperor penguins. We have the trip all the way through the Ross Sea, all the way to New Zealand. And at the end of the season, we sail back to the north, which is the trip we call the Atlantic Odyssey. But for today, we will talk about the north, about the Arctic. Our Arctic season starts in May with our Svalbard trips. From May to September. Towards the end of the season, between August and September, we also visit East Greenland. And after that, from November to April, we sail in North Norway with our sailing vessel, Rembrandt van Rijn, which I already showed. So actually we have a year-round program in the Arctic. Now, I will give the floor to Jan to tell us everything we want to know about Svalbard to choose the perfect voyage.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here. And thank you, Franklin, for inviting me. Unfortunately, it is now 1.5 years ago that I was in Spitsbergen for the last time. Due to the COVID situation, our trips from last year were all canceled, as you probably know. So, we all hope that we can be back on track soon. It might take a while still, but I'm looking forward to starting guiding in the north again, hopefully this year. But I was very happy that Oceanwide asked me to give a presentation on Spitsbergen. So I went through my pictures and made a presentation. And I'm happy to share my passion with you about this beautiful archipelago in the far north. Spitsbergen, Svalbard, you hear both names. I use the name Spitsbergen for the whole archipelago, but the Norwegian or international name is more Svalbard. But for me, that's sort of the same. Spitsbergen is the historical name and Svalbard more the international name for the area, but it doesn't matter in this case. I will first talk a little bit about the general idea of Spitsbergen, where it is, and then a little bit of history, and then I will take you on a photographic journey, just like what you might expect of a trip with us around or along the islands. So where can you find it? You probably know it if you are on a webinar like this that you must have seen or heard already about Spitsbergen. It is quite far north. From the northern tip, it's about 1,000 kilometers to the North Pole, and from the southern tip, it's about 650 kilometers from Norway, from the northern coast of Finnmark. To the left, this big island is Greenland, and to the right, you have the Russian islands of Franz Josef Land, which is only 200 to 300 kilometers away from Svalbard, Spitsbergen, and Nova Zemlya. It's very remote, but not as remote as Antarctica, because we can fly there easily. In Antarctica, you have the Drake Passage here. The ships do not start in Norway, but you take a plane from Norway to Svalbard, where there's just a great big airport, so you have an airliner. And that makes a big difference. So not a rough Drake Passage that you might have experienced yourself or you might have heard about, but it's easy to get there, and then you're already in the Arctic to start the trip. A little bit about the islands themselves. To give you a size, it is about 62,000 square kilometers, which doesn't ring a bell maybe to you, but it's sort of the size of Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg together. It's about 450 kilometers long and 370 kilometers wide. As you can see to the top right, you see more white, which is Nordhauslandet, a big island in the northeast, which is much more Arctic or high Arctic, as we call it, because there's no influence or less influence from the warm Gulf current, which you have still on the western side. That's where the settlements are. And that's where it's less, well, it's a lower Arctic, you could say. There are more plants, more. It's not that there's more wildlife, because a lot of wildlife like polar bears and walrus live in the northeast. But there's a difference in landscape, you could say. It's mountainous, but not as high as, for instance, the Alps or a lot of other mountains, because the ice cap has been covering the archipelago for a long time, and it has been crushing and pushing down the area. So the highest mountain is about 1,700 meters, the Newtontoppen. And then there's around 900, 1,000 meters ridges everywhere, and especially in the northwest. You have the sharp peaks, these mountains where the name Spitsbergen comes from, which is a Dutch word that means sharp mountains. A little bit on the history. The Dutch were starting their golden century in the beginning of the 16th century, and they were looking for a passage to China, to Cathay, to start trading, because they were not allowed by the Spaniards and the Portuguese to use the southern routes. And that's why several navigators were sent out or searching for a northeastern passage. And it were, in fact, the names of our ships, Plancius, Ortelius, and Hondius, those were the cartographers that Franklin also mentioned, that were looking for these or believing in this northeast passage, which you can see also on this left-hand map, which was originally a map by Mercator, the famous map maker, but it was adapted by Hondius. And there you see that in the middle, the North Pole is an iron sort of island, making the magnetic field, they thought. This is what they really believed, and they thought you could sail around it and then reach China. So in 1596, Willem Barents, a Dutch navigator, tried to find this northeast passage, and he sailed along. He first discovered the island Bear Island, which you might have heard about, Björnøya, and then he discovered the new land, as they called it first, which you see on the right-hand side in the red circle, and that was finally Spitsbergen. Then he sailed further, and they went to Nova Zembla, where they got stuck in the ice and finally had to stay over for the winter. But what they also saw were all these animals there. You see them on the map, all the whales and the small dots are walruses. But that's why this information came out, and that's why in the years to come, in the beginning of the 17th century, a lot of people went there to hunt for the whales, the whale hunters, because of the information that they got from Willem Barents and the people after him. So in the 17th century, for about 80 years, the whole area of Spitsbergen was visited by whale hunters, mainly from Britain and the Netherlands. And you had dozens of ships there every summer season. They normally didn't stay in winter, only a few attempts that didn't work out well, but they stayed there and they were hunting this bowhead whale, which is also called the Greenland right whale. Because of the oil was used in lamps to burn the oil for light. So most of Europe was using oil for the lighting in the houses, but also you might have heard of the Berlin plates, from the big plates hanging from the head, down from the head, that they used to sieve out the krill, the small animals that they eat, and they were used for corsets later and umbrellas and lots of other things. So there were no other people living there in the 17th century, and for this century there were only the whalers, and then after about 70, 80 years, when the whales were gone because of overhunting and a change of climate, the whalers left, and then their place was taken by hunters, mainly first from Russia, and then, and this is, by the way, what they found. The archaeologists were doing excavations in the 1980s, and they had a lot of evidence of these whalers, like these coffins that they found, where still the whalers were in the permafrost, were really buried, and they could find a lot of tissue and corpses, but also the heads of the harpoons. This is found by archaeologists, but what we still can find ourselves are bones, like the big head, part of the head of a bowhead whale, but also the graves of the whale hunters. So that is what is left there from the whale hunters. As I mentioned, then after that, the trappers came. First Russian trappers, because it was the Russians that came first, but around 1850, the Norwegians came, and that's when it started to get into the Norwegian influence. On the right-hand side, you see the first female trapper, Vannie Wolstad from Tromsø, who also tried and became a trapper there, hunting polar bears, but they were going after foxes and also walruses. So a lot of hunting has been going on, and a lot of wildlife was killed in Spitsbergen. But fortunately, now most of it is a nature reserve. So hunting is not allowed in most places, and a lot of the wildlife has been coming back a lot. That accounts for the whales, but also the foxes and the bears. There are other threats now, like climate change, which has a huge influence, as you must know, on the Arctic. But we do see a lot of wildlife, fortunately, still, because it's still there and there's no hunting going on, or at least not that much anymore. In the end of the 19th century, in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, a lot of companies and people came to Spitsbergen, which was still a no man's land, to find minerals like coal, but also gold and iron, a bit like the gold rush in Alaska. So here you see two pictures from the town of Barentsburg, which used to be a Dutch town, but then became a Russian mining town. And you still see Lenin at the square of the village. This is at the entrance of the Isfjord. And there's still Russian and Ukrainian miners and people living there, about 450. So it's a very interesting thing that in a Norwegian archipelago, there is a Russian village, because it has a special status. Because of a treaty that was signed in the 1920s, Spitsbergen is still sort of no man's land, but Norway has the sovereignty. So those Barentsburg is at the entrance of the Isfjord, but further north, there used to be another mining village, which is Ny-Ålesund, which is the northernmost settlement in the world, they say. This is what we also like to visit on our trips. Not on every trip, but on most trips, we want to visit Ny-Ålesund. So if you want to go there, make sure you check the itinerary of the ships. That's for all the ships. It used to be a mining village, but in the 1960s, there were big mining accidents, and then they closed down the mines, and now It is a science village. It's dedicated for science. It has the most northern post office still of the world, so it's an attraction for people to go there and send postcards. But the big thing is that it is a scientific area where scientists from all over the world come to do climate change research, but also geology and biology. Here you see that a weather balloon is released because I do weather measurements, but a lot of sophisticated stuff is going on. Now, we like to visit Ny-Ålesund, but we cannot visit the stations because that's restricted, but we can walk around and look around. And there's a museum with a science exhibition. On the right-hand side, you see the figurehead, which is Roald Amundsen, the famous Norwegian explorer who did 4 attempts from Ny-Ålesund in the 1920s to reach the North Pole. So that's also things you can see over there. So interesting place, Ny-Ålesund, and if you want to go there, check the itineraries. And then there's Longyearbyen, the third settlement, which is the place where you normally go to when you go on a trip with us. That's where the airport is. So all people that want to go there, if you do not go with a ship, you need to fly to Longyearbyen. And it sounds like Longyear, that they have a longer year than we have, but it's the name of an American miner who started a coal mine there, Mr. Longyear. And Bien is a Norwegian word for town or place. So Longyear City used to be the original name. As I mentioned, you fly from Oslo. You have direct flights, but also flights via Tromsø with a normal airliner to the modern airport of Longyearbyen. Here you see Spitsbergen late in the season. The first snow is there. This is about September, I think, when I went on trips. Still beautiful, no ice yet in the fjords, and really great views. And then when you land there, this is at the airport in Longyearbyen. If you land on the same day that our trips are starting, then with the normal flights, there will be a bus waiting for passengers on our ships. And the bus will take you and your luggage into town. The luggage will be dropped in the pier where the ship is, and you will be dropped in the village where you can walk around until about 4 o'clock. And then it's time to walk in about 20, 25 minutes along the road to the pier where the ship probably is. So the luggage will already be on board, and you can come on board and around after 4 o'clock because we still have to prepare the ship. Longyearbyen, here you see it. This is an older picture. Near the river, there are now more buildings. So I haven't been there now for 1.5 years, and I need to retake some pictures, I think. But it's a small, bustling village now with hotels and shops. Here you can see the town center. With on the right-hand side, there's the Svalbard Boutique, the supermarket, but you can get good coffees nowadays. And if you arrive there and you think it's quite chilly and you don't have enough clothing, you can still buy all the gear in town. Everything is there. There's sports shops and outdoor shops, things. So it's really a good place to spend a few hours before you come on board. It's also worthwhile to come a bit earlier, a day earlier or so, because they do have a lot of day trips from Longyearbyen to Pyramide, which is another Russian village, or to Barentsburg, because we do not visit that regularly on our voyages, as there are so many day trips going there. So it's worthwhile in the beginning or in the end, maybe to come a day earlier or later. This is a serious traffic sign at the edge of the village, and it warns you for polar bears. And that makes Spitsbergen very special, because I'm sure if you go to other places on holidays or travels, you will not have this, and you can roam around on your own without much danger. But here you cannot. You need to be skilled with a rifle, or you need to go with a guide, because otherwise it's not safe to go in Spitsbergen, to walk around, because bears are also walking around even through the villages sometimes. Even 2 years ago, there was one going through Longyearbyen and also through Ny-Ålesund, but then there are at least places where you can hide. But if you go outside of the village, there's not. So that's a good reason to go on an organized tour where there are skilled and experienced guides that can help you around. At this place, there's also where the pier is. In the distance on the horizon, you see the airport, but this is where the pier is, where the ship is, where Ortelius is now alongside the pier. We like to go alongside the pier because it makes it much easier to get on board, but nowadays it is getting quite busy, so a lot of ships might be there, and then there's no space at the pier, so a lot of ships have to go at anchor. That's why it's important, if you land in Longyearbyen, to take out your warm gear already, because you might be shuttled with a Zodiac, these rubber boats that we use a lot, from the pier to the ship, and then you might need your waterproof trousers and jacket and your gloves. So don't forget, if you come to Longyearbyen, make sure you have that in your hand luggage, because your luggage will already be transported to the ship and you do not have access to it when you might need to go in a Zodiac. So a little bit on which trips we have. Not too much. You have to find that on the website or ask travel agents. But we do not have the same trips all through the season. In the beginning of the season, there might be a lot of pack ice in the north, so we cannot get round. Although our ships are ice strengthened, we can go in the ice in the beginning of the season. Often there's too much pack ice for us to travel around, so we are restricted to the northwest. The Rembrandt normally starts around April, and our motor ships start at the end of May, beginning of June. And then we do go to the northwest, and we try to travel as far north with our motor ships. We will travel in the ice because that's what we love. That's where often polar bears are found, but we do not know how far we can get. It sounds a bit silly, but it is not Disneyland. From year to year, situations change with the ice, with the weather. So we do not know what to expect ourselves when we arrive in Spitsbergen. There might be a lot of ice one year, and the next year there might be not too much ice, and we have to travel far north to reach the edge of the pack ice. So that's why we do not plan any round trips until the end of June and the beginning of July. Then we will start with these round trips. Then we travel far north to the Schuoyane, the 7 islands, if we can, and then through Hinlopen and then around. The sailing vessel Rembrandt Verijn stays more in the northwest. It will not travel around because it's not as ice strengthened as our motor ships, but it will do a lot of things in the north all through the summer season. And then later in the season, so then you talk about the end of July, we also do trips around this Nordhauslandet, and then we really go in the high Arctic towards Kvitøya, which is not always possible again, but we do try every year, which is a very remote area and what we call the high Arctic, still with lots of wildlife. So that's what we have. And then in August, most of our ships, or all of our ships, even our sailing vessel, they will travel to Greenland. They will cross, going alongside the pack ice, cross the Greenland Sea to the northeast of Greenland. And that takes much longer. It's just one trip for each ship towards Greenland. So they will end in Iceland. The Rembrandt will end in Scoresby-Sund, where passengers are picked up at the little airstrip, but the other ships will go to Iceland, where there's an exchange of passengers. But these trips are longer. Like, for instance, the Rembrandt is 18 days and it's 14 days with the motor ships. And then we will do from August and until September, we do trips in Northeast Greenland, Scoresby-Sund. All right, so more information you can find on the website or look it up with the travel agents. Again, back to the pier in Longyearbyen. Here's the planches on departure. You can see passengers standing and looking. There's lots of deck space on the ships, which is important with all our different ships with different number of passengers. It's great to have space to stand and not in a big group that you cannot see things. So there are different levels also on the bow where people can spot wildlife and look around. So there's lots of space and beautiful, great windows, as you can see here from the lounge. So even if you don't want to sit inside, you can look and enjoy from the inside. Now, we do a lot of briefings on board. So these are the first briefings. There will be a briefing about safety on board and the life jackets, and there will be a drill. And every day there will be briefings about what to expect and what kind of landings we will do. Also, we will tell you what kind of groups we want to make, because we do not land all together in one group. That's too many. We make groups of 20, maybe a little bit more, with several guides, and we might have leisurely groups or hiking groups. So that information you get every time, and you can choose and pick which groups you like to join. And then around 6 o'clock in the evening, so you arrive on the ship, you can start coming on board from 4 o'clock. Then at 6 o'clock, we depart from Longyearbyen and we sail through the big Isfjord towards the north. And there's still beautiful scenery, nice mountains. So it's worthwhile being here on the bow or on the deck, looking out for wildlife, birds. As I said, lots of space. These slides I put in also to show you a bit about the weather. You're going to the Arctic if you want to join. And we think of the Arctic of something very cold, but in summer, in fact, it's not always that cold. It depends a lot on the wind. Here you can see these people sitting on deck on the right-hand side, enjoying, and they don't look dressed that they're dressed so warm. No jackets, no hats, no gloves, so it doesn't look too cold. And this is also the case sometimes. Imagine it can be, it will be 24 hours daylight. So the sun, although it's not that strong, it has an effect. And as Spitsbergen is situated that far north, you're in the polar high pressure area. So you do not, those of you that have been in Antarctica, you know the Drake Passage and the rough, strong winds and storms you can experience there. That's normally not that much the case in Spitsbergen. It's much more calm and less cold, you could say, because of less wind. But again, there's lots of space for those that like photography, birds and wildlife. Whales, you have good spots on board of the ship to enjoy the scenery. If the weather is not too good, or if you just like to visit the bridge, we have an open bridge policy. That means you can come and see and enjoy on the bridge, but of course, people are working there, the navigation goes on, so you always have to be careful not to disturb the navigation. And it is only possible when there are no maneuvers going on, like anchoring and stuff like that. On the left-hand side, it's the Ortelius. It's a large bridge, but on the Rembrandt van Rijn, as you can see to the right, is a very tiny one. Then only 1 or 2 people can join at a time. We will explain more about that on board. But on the motor ships, there's a lot more space for passengers to come to the bridge. Here, a bit more on the sailing ship. So we do like to sail, but the weather is often quite calm on Spitsbergen, as I mentioned. So not too much wind. And then we cannot wait for the wind because we like to travel to places that we want to show you. So we do have a good engine and we will go on the engine quite often. But we like to sail at least once or twice on the trip at least. And then often passengers are invited to help. You do not have to be a sailor yourself. If you like to be on a ship like the Rembrandt, you're welcome and you can learn about it, but you do not have to be a sailor. So we like to sail, but often we will travel on engine. So there's no promise, because if we wait for the wind, we might need to wait for a long time. So it's worthwhile looking, especially at the entrances of the fjords, like the big Isfjord. We often see whales, and the last decade we see more and more whales, I must say. When I started 25 years ago, whales were quite rare. We sometimes saw a fin whale, but now it is almost on every trip. We see blue whales, fin whales, sometimes big groups of humpback whales, minke whales. So yeah, there's very good chances in summer to see whales here now. Because of no hunting anymore, the whales are coming back to the places where they used to live and now feed again in summer. These are belugas, the white whales that belong to the Arctic, like the bowhead whale. They're one of the 2 true Arctic whales. Really nice to see, but you need to see them from above. Now, you might think that we use a drone here, but it's not true, because drones are not allowed for us to be used. So if you you have a drone and you think to take it with you, it's not allowed on board. We're not allowed to use any drones. These pictures were made from a cliff, and we were very lucky looking down on the pod of belugas passing by. So you need to be lucky to be on the right spot to see them. We do see them also from the ship. So if you climb higher up, you have a better viewpoint to see them. But we do see whales quite often on our trips. Then we will sail through the night towards the north. And then the next morning, when you have your breakfast and the first briefings, then the ship will anchor or float somewhere in the fjord where we like to go on shore. And we will deploy our gangways, these stairs that you see here on the Hondius. These we use for you to board the Zodiacs. So it makes it much easier to go down the stairs and into the Zodiacs. When it's calm, it's very easy. When the sea is very calm, when it's more rough, then it is a little bit more difficult, but there's always help for you. And it's quite easy in a way to do this. We always find a sheltered spot. If it's too rough, we go to a more sheltered area. So we do try to make at least 1 or 2 trips landings each day. So for us, the landing is very important. It's not like on a cruise ship that you just see the scenery from the ship. No, we want to go actively on land and do hikes or visit beautiful places, see wildlife also from the shore. So these Zodiacs are used every day, and we will brief you properly on how to use them. On the Hondius and also on the new ship Jansonius, there's also a new way, modern way or different way to board the Zodiacs, and that's through what we call a shell door. It's a door in the hull of the ship from which it's much more easy in a way to get into the Zodiacs. So here you can see how that works. So if you sort of think the gangway, the stairs are not for you, then this might be another option. On the Rembrandt that you see here, there's a small metal stairs of just a few steps that also brings you down in the Zodiacs. We have the same Zodiacs, same type on the Rembrandt, 2 of them. So also there, it's the same way to go on shore. Life jackets are very important because although they're very stable and sturdy, safe boats, it's important to be safe. And that's what accounts for all our trips. We want to work very safe with polar bears, with boats. In this environment, you have to be very careful, but that's what we're trained for. A shuttle, depending on how far the ship can anchor from the shore, might take 5 to 10 minutes. So it's important to dress warm and waterproof because there might be spray coming in if there are waves, especially those that sit on the bow. You have to be careful not to get wet sometimes. Not in this case because it's super calm, but it's also very important to protect your gear, your cameras really well against the salt spray. So make sure you take waterproof bags or things with you to protect your cameras. Don't have them out when it's more windy and rough because then it might ruin your cameras and your binoculars. The landings will happen on remote beaches like this, sometimes on rocks or different places, but there are no piers. Everything is what we call a wet landing. This is on the island of Edgeøya in the east, beautiful place called Kapli. A nice easy beach. Sometimes it's more rough, sometimes there are more waves, and that's why you always have to land with rubber boots. You cannot land from our ships with shoes. The good news is that on our motor ships, we offer rubber boots, very comfortable, warm rubber boots. On the Rembrandt, we do not have them available for passengers, so you have to bring them yourself. And they should be high rubber boots with a good profile, because you also use them for the hiking. I will show you a little bit later an example of a boot, how it looks and why you need them. But so rubber boots are used for the landings. There will be help for you getting out and into the Zodiacs. That's all. Well, we take care, of course, that there's a safe landing on all these places. On shore, we will divide into several groups. There might be several or one leisurely groups for those of you that like to go more slow. You do not want to cover a lot of kilometers or climb hills and mountains, whatever. Those groups walk along the shore, they enjoy, they have more time, so they can spend as much time as the others, but they do not have to rush or anything. You can enjoy, see the plants. If you like photography, there's more time. There are groups of about 20, 25, maybe 30 passengers with 1 or 2 guides together, so you have time to walk around. But also there will be hiking groups, like here on the right-hand side, that do more adventurous things, because there are lots of things to be done, also hikes and activities. Here you see the Hondius in the distance. This is a leisurely group enjoying the scenery, really calm, beautiful day, a blue sky, sunny, so it's nice to sit around and enjoy. Sometimes the wildlife passes by. You might see whales in the fjords, birds passing by, and there will be plants, flowers around. Really, really great day to enjoy. We also have ideas to walk to glaciers because there are lots of glaciers. This is the Magdalena Fjord, the Gullibreen, a beautiful small glacier. It's low tide, so we can follow the coastline very easy. And you see all these little bits of glacier ice on the beach. And it's really amazing to see these glacial fronts, and sometimes huge pieces break off into the fjord. And as I mentioned, hikes. We do offer hikes for those hiking-minded people that go to little peaks for the view, where you have a 360 degrees view all around you. I mentioned the rubber boots. This boot to the left I found that was stuck in the mud from another group. So it was not from our ship. Somebody left it there. So I'm pretty sure that person went back to the ship on his or her socks. They couldn't get it out of the mud. I took it with me and threw it away on board because one boot we cannot use really. But this is sort of the height that you need if you want to bring your own boots, which on the motor ships you do not need to do. But on the Rembrandt, you need comfortable high boots with a good hiking profile. Because most or all hikes are done on rubber boots. As you see to the right, we sometimes cross rivers. If the snow is melting, the tundra, this huge area with plants can be very muddy because there is a permafrost, a frozen soil under the tundra, and the water cannot go down. So it can be muddy in the beginning of summer, really, and then rubber boots are very important. That's me on the left-hand side. I'm carrying binoculars, and that's also an advice I like to give you. Buy or get some binoculars if you don't have them, because it's really worthwhile. Some animals might not come close. Some animals we don't want to get close, like polar bears. So it's worthwhile to have that you are able to look through them through binoculars. Whales, polar bears, walruses, some might get close, but of course bears we don't want to get too close, and then binoculars are worthwhile. Think of it. Different circumstances. There can be snow all through the year. Here there's not too much snow, but it's nice to play around and it's still easy to walk. But if the snow is too thick, especially in the beginning of the season, so that's until, well, the whole month of June, there can be still snow. Then we also carry snowshoes on board. On all the ships, also on Rembrandt van Rijn, we have snowshoes available, and they are modern snowshoes. They're easy to use for everybody. If you can walk normally, you can also walk on these snowshoes. They're very lightweight. And it makes it possible to walk through deep snow. Otherwise, you will dive into the snow, which makes walking very difficult. So it's fun, especially in the beginning of the season, to hike on the snowshoes. We use them a lot then. So May and June are the best months for the snowshoes. And then July, there will be much less snow. The snow is getting more wet. And then it will be more rubber boots. Often people ask, what is the best month for hiking? Those hiking-minded people, every month in a way is good for hiking, because snow hiking in the beginning of the season is great. And then in July, the tundra might be getting more dry. It's also great to hike on the tundra that has the flowers. So then it's no snowshoes, but it's still very good for hiking. We do offer more activities. Like in Antarctica, we have base camp trips, which means that from the ship, more activities are deployed, like kayaking, snowshoe hiking. We have photography groups and some mountaineering, light mountaineering. These are normally included in a base camp, but inform well what you like to do, because we also offer dedicated diving. So then on regular trips, there will be diving groups, but you need to be a skilled diver. And that's the same for skiing. We offer skiing trips, but you need to be a skilled skier. So inform well if you want to do these two things, that you have the knowledge and you know what we expect of you from your experience. In Antarctica, we offer also camping, but you can imagine we don't do that in the north because of the polar bears. So no camping is offered in the north. But so if you're interested in more activities, more sportive activities, then look for the base camp trips. But we do hikes, and we do also offer other things like some kayaking on regular trips. So what can you expect of the hikes? Well, we go there to see things, and there's lots to be seen. You see here driftwood that we find on the beaches. It can be very old, thousands of years old sometimes, because it comes often from Siberia, from the taiga, the forests in Siberia, and the trees are washed into the big rivers and then are brought through the ice and on the sea to Spitsbergen, where they're washed up on the beach. Nowadays, also a lot comes from ships, so you see more modern trees and trunks lying around, and unfortunately also lots of plastic nowadays. So on a lot of our trips, we also do voluntarily cleaning beaches, beach cleaning, which is a good thing to do. You're not forced to do it, and it doesn't interfere with our regular program. But for those of you that like to help around, we do bring plastic bags on shore to collect fishing nets and all kinds of plastic rubbish, because the wildlife is also having troubles with this plastic. Reindeer are getting entangled with their antlers in the fishing nets, and a lot of birds and animals in the sea, they ingest plastic, small particles, and it's very bad for them. So it's very good to clean up beaches and helping the environment also where we can. We do see a lot of old things. Here you see an old whale bone, and it was not a whale that was killed by the whale hunters in the 17th century, but it's much older. This whale died naturally on a beach thousands of years ago. And it is now incorporated in the tundra. And you can see that a lot of plants are growing there because the nutrients from the bone are washed out into the soil. And that's why a lot of plants can grow there. You see these purple colors. So these flowers benefit from the nutrients from the bones. For those of you that have been in Antarctica, you don't go there for the flowers because in fact, there are only 2 higher plant species in Antarctica. And the rest is just algae and lichens. But here in Svalbard, you find a lot of beautiful flowers. So if you're interested in plants, this is also a place to go. There are really many. I only show 4 here. There's the Svalbard poppy, the national flower of Spitsbergen, to the top left. And then to the right, there's the purple saxifrage. And to the down left, there's a woolly louseworth and a moss campion to the right. So beautiful flowers, beautiful plants that you can enjoy on the tundra. Also artifacts from these trappers and the whale hunters, as I mentioned. Here you see an old trapper cabin, Texas bar. Not a real bar, of course, but probably a trapper with some humor. Put the name on it. And there's to the right a fox trap that was used by the hunters to catch foxes for the fur. You see one of the guides standing there. He's there also to explain things to you, but he's also there to safeguard you because of the polar bear. Well, threat, danger. It is really important to have skilled guides there that look around and make sure that you are safe, but also that we do not kill any polar bears. We want to, when we see a bear, we normally retreat to the ships because we do not want to interfere. So it's a very important thing to stay in the group. And that makes a destination like Spitsbergen very different from other destinations where you might have traveled, because if you come on a hike, you cannot walk back on your own to the ship. You always need to be together with somebody with a weapon, with a guide. So we are stuck together when you start on a hike, then we need to be there and come back all together, which is a very important thing. And back on board, we offer lectures, information about things we have seen. Here there's a lecture on explorers to the left. That's on the planches, where also we have these projectors and also called beamers. On the Ortelius to the right, we have a beautiful big lecture room where everybody can sit and follow lectures that we give every day. Also the briefings, but also lectures on interesting topics like history and biology. And this is on our other ship, Hondius, then, our big new flagship, where there is the big lounge where we can give lectures, but it also has a separate lecture room where we can give lectures to smaller groups. And of course, it's not only hiking and information like lectures, also, well, the food is important. We do notice that first complaints always are about, if it happens, about the food. The food needs to be really good because you get very hungry being outside in the cold. And that's why we offer really good food on all of our ships, also on the Rembrandt, of course. Although it's a smaller ship and it doesn't have a big kitchen like on the other ships, it still has all the fresh stuff, the salads and the vegetables nowadays. When I started 25 years ago, it was still not that easy to get fresh vegetables in Norway, but nowadays we can carry everything and buy everything. So it is really nice food, like in a restaurant or a hotel. That we can offer on the ships. So this is the restaurant on the Plantius, where you can sit together with family or with other people, passengers on board, or bigger tables. On the Rembrandt, as I mentioned, it's all a bit smaller, but still the food is really great and it's nice, has a really good atmosphere. So the Rembrandt has a lot to offer. It's different from our motor ships, but it's still, well, you have your own 2-person cabin and it has the same good beds and everything. So do not expect a Spartan thing because of a sailing vessel. It still offers all the comfort that you need in a cold environment. The bar, also on the Rembrandt here to the left, and some white wine, I think it is, with some glacier ice. If the weather is great and the chef is in for it, then there might be even a lunch outside. So those things are also sometimes happening and are very nice. The bar is very important to relax. We also have informal meetings, so-called recaps, where we share small details. Here, Victoria, one of our guides, is explaining something about history, I'm sure, because she's an historian. but also just to enjoy a drink with friends and family. They are very important, of course. But for most of us, we come for the wildlife, which is out there. It's not on the ship. You can see things from the ship, but in fact, most things are happening out there. That's why we are there, to enjoy the wildlife. Here we see beautiful reindeer, Svalbard reindeer. They are very curious, coming towards us. Some mothers with calves that can be very curious. But if you only carry a small pocket camera, then you cannot get the great pictures, because the wildlife normally is not coming too close, especially not, as I mentioned, the polar bears. We don't want to get them very close. So make sure, like binoculars, that you carry a good camera with you if you want to make great pictures. Nowadays, you do not need a huge reflex camera, but there are also good compact cameras with zoom lenses. So invest a little bit in binoculars and a nice camera if you want to come for some good pictures. But it's not only pictures, it's also experience, of course, to be out there and creating good memories. Like here, the fox, really, this is one of my great memories. It doesn't happen every trip. As I mentioned, it's not Disneyland, so you need to be lucky. It varies from year to year, from trip to trip, from season to season, and it's never the same. So you need to be lucky. Every trip things are happening, but not the same things are happening. This fox was really rare. Foxes are very skittish. They don't come close normally, but this fox really came close, as you can see. He was curious. This was late in the season, I think, because the birds were gone. Somewhere August, September, that it was looking for food, and then they get more daring, I think. So beautiful experience when wildlife comes to you. We should not chase wildlife. We like wildlife also to come to us and enjoy it. But that's not for the polar bears. So here you see some footprints in the snow. We were doing a snow hike along the coast. You see one of our sailing ships in the distance. And there we saw fresh tracks of a polar bear. So I was really, really on my guard, because the bear could be anywhere. Normally we do leave the shore when we see a polar bear. Here I didn't see the bear yet, but it could be around any corner, around behind any hill. So you have to be very careful. Like here, the footprints to the left, that was fresh mud, where we saw these footprints. To the right, you see the size. There it was an old footprint from a bear, but you can see the size of the footprint. So we do see evidence of polar bears a lot. But of course, you wonder about the polar bears themselves. Here is a bit more evidence. There are droppings of a polar bear here. These are so-called summer droppings. In summer, there are no seals for them to catch, and they start to graze the plants. So it looks more like droppings from a horse or a cow, but it's in fact also from a polar bear. The one to the right was more lucky, because a seal was killed and only its coat was left behind. So you can see the guide in the background with the red jacket and the rifle, really on her guard, looking out for the bear, because it still might be around. It was not too old, these remains of the seal. So polar bears, a little bit later I will talk more about it, but we need to find them. We do not know where they are. It's always a search for the polar bear. Beautiful places still, there are many around. Beautiful bird canyons, like here, Kap Waldburg, this canyon, which is full of thousands of kittiwakes. Really, really beautiful place. Big noise they make, these kittiwakes, so it's lovely to go inside. It's also a place where we do often see polar bears, because they come for the smell, and maybe there are dead birds, so there's something to find for them. So it's a place where we cannot land because a bear is in the canyon. Also, and that's for the birders, interesting, all kinds of interesting birds, like the little auk here, which is the most numerous bird of Spitsbergen. Tiny birds that breed in the scree slopes of the islands. And it's nice to just sit there, just on the edge of the colony, where we're not in the colony, but on the edge, and just wait and relax. And then the birds pass by, and you have the most beautiful, pictures and just memories also. Beautiful little birds. They make a humming noise like a group of bees when they pass by. Here there's a long-tailed skua. You see it also in front of the person in black. And again, if you have a nice camera, then it's easy to make a good shot of it. This bird doesn't have any enemies, so it's not skittish. It will just relax. It came to us. We didn't walk towards it, but it just landed. at our feet. Beautiful king eiders, and well, this is one of the holy grails for birders that come to Spitsbergen, the ivory gull, the beautiful white gulls that live on the pack ice and follow polar bears because they eat the leftovers from the seals very often. So where you see lots of ivory gulls, there is a higher chance of polar bears often. So for birders, it's quite a good place. One of the great places also is in the Hindlopen Strait, which is Alkefjellet, a beautiful bird cliff where you cannot land, so we use our Zodiacs to go there. So we make a Zodiac cruise with these Zodiacs. You need to dress warm because you will stay in the Zodiacs, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and we go to the bird cliff and see what is there. There are thousands of Brunix guillemots here. So the noise also from them flying around and breeding on the cliffs is really enormous. Beautiful birds, so look a bit like penguins, black and white, but they still can fly because of the predators. They're not, well, although they are birds, they're not closely related to penguins, which live in the south, of course. But these birds are sort of adapted in the same way to the environment because they like to dive also for their food. They're skilled divers, but they still have the ability to fly. As I mentioned, these Zodiacs, we use them a lot for Zodiac cruises because they're really great in places where you expect seals on ice floes, walruses maybe on ice floes. So Zodiac cruises we like to do a lot. Maybe a landing and a Zodiac cruise in a day, then you have really great experiences. Also ice, for those of you that have been in Antarctica or Greenland, there the icebergs are much bigger. There you have the cathedral-like icebergs. In Spitsbergen, everything is a bit smaller because the glaciers are not as high and not as old. They do not create huge cathedral-like icebergs, but still it's beautiful, beautiful colors. So it's really nice to make a Zodiac cruise. This is in the Hornsund in the southwest, which is really good for Zodiac cruising. And the ice is not only nice to see, but it's also nice to take on board for a drink. We normally take it into the bar and you can spoil your whiskey with it, or as I prefer it, to put it in a nice gin and tonic. So it's not only beautiful, but it's also to enjoy thousands of years old water in this ice, very pure. Not only glacier ice, but also pack ice or fjord ice in this case with the Rembrandt. The fjord was still frozen early in the season. And there you have also good chances for bears or seals on the ice. So it's a nice, interesting place to go there. But especially the pack ice in the north is where we like to go. And this is just a tiny little bit of pack ice, but with this weather, where it is very calm and sunny, is really, really amazing. And very often there's wildlife around. This is just north of the archipelago where the pack ice started. And then we normally continue further where there's more ice like this. Ice is nice, as they say, but then again, it should not be too much. So some years there is a really lot of ice, and then it's for our ships, which are very strong ships built to be in the ice. They have a very high ice class, but even then it's more difficult to get in the ice. As I mentioned, the ice, it's where the polar bears live and where they hunt. It's their habitat. So that's why we like to go there, and that's where you have the best chances to see them, and also the safest way to see them, not from the land, but from the ships. So when you're lucky, and we are very lucky often, not on every trip, but on most of our trips, we do see polar bears. We sort of have an idea where to go, where there are best chances to see them. But again, it's not Disneyland. We do not know exactly where they are. They roam around, and it varies from year to year where they are. So some years there are lots of bears, some years there are less bears. And I often give the example from trips I made. One trip I made around the islands, and I had 43 bears on that trip. Immediately after that one, I made the same trip around Svalbard, and I had only one bear. And where were the other 42 bears? I really don't know. The only difference had been that it had been snowing in the meantime, and the bears probably were still there, but we didn't see them. So we landed, and I still had the idea that behind every little hill or every little hump of snow could be a polar bear. But that gives you an idea of how difficult it can be or how different it can be depending on the circumstances. Sometimes there's a lot of pack ice and the bears have all the time to roam north out of reach of the ships. And sometimes lots of bears stay behind on land because the ice retreats and the bears stay on land for a long time all through the summer, and we see lots of them. But it's great. It's really nice to see them here where they live, where they hunt. And when you're lucky, you see them hunting, which does happen that they they go after a seal that is somewhere on an ice floe. And sometimes they really come to the ship, which is, of course, is what else can you, you cannot expect to see anything better. We do not want to interfere with wildlife, so we let the bears decide. We do not chase them. It's a nature area, so we always have respect for the wildlife. So think of that. We cannot promise how close we can get you to wildlife. It depends on the wildlife itself. Not only polar bears, but also walruses are the big animals that we all like to see, and I really love walruses. Nowadays, there are many that have been hunted fiercely, but again, the wildlife is really going well at the moment. There's lots of walruses around in summer. When there's pack ice, they are on ice floes, and then in summer, they are more on beaches like this, and then we can land on the shore and walk towards them very slowly. We will explain about it, how to do it in small groups, and it gives you an idea here how things like that might happen. The restrictions in areas like Spitsbergen are very strict. We're not allowed to do or to change things or to scare wildlife, as you can imagine. So we need to have a minimum distance, or what they call a non-disturbance distance. So we have respect for the wildlife. It's a very important thing, especially nowadays with climate change and more ships coming to this area. We're not the only people looking at this group of walrus. So we should be really careful not to disturb them. But again, if you have a good camera or binoculars, then from this distance, you always have good shots. It's really beautiful. Amazing animals. And you wonder sometimes, who are the tourists? Are we the tourists, or are the walrus the ones that come to look at us? If you're lucky and you walk along the beach where you are safe, you shouldn't go too close to them in the water, then you can have really great experiences. So that's what we can offer on trips like this. It's always a surprise, but there always are things happening. It's happening out there. Life on board of our ships is great, but life outside is much better. That's where it's happening. I'm at the end of my presentation now, so I give the word back now. And if you have any questions, put it in the chat, and we can still answer it from here or later by email. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jan. Great presentation, and we actually do have a few questions in the chat. A few of them that I can already answer. There was one question about the Noorderlicht. Yes, we do also sail with the Noorderlicht and another of our sailing vessels. It's not mentioned in the presentation because as from next year, so this year we sail with, as from next year we will not sail with the Noorderlicht anymore, focusing on our new arrivals on the Ansonius and Hannius. So that's the reason why it's not in the presentation. A question from, I guess, someone who has been to Antarctica. If the post office in Yellowsund is also British, like the Port Lockroy post office, but that won't be the case. It's Norwegian. Maybe a good question from a birder for you, Jan. When is the best period to see king eiders?
King eiders, you should be early in the season. Most eiders are common eiders, and then later when they start to breed, when the snow is gone, then you won't find the king eiders that much. And also because they're breeding, you can't get close to them because then you will disturb them. So early in the season, and that means May and June, when the breeding areas, the tundra is still covered with snow, then they wait along the shore in the water and they sit on the little ice floes. So that's the best time to see the king eiders. It's also the most easy to see them because the orange beak, you can see them really, really well with the snowy background. So early in the season, the early trips are the best for the king eiders, but it's not the best place. Of course, there are places like Iceland or other places where you have lots more of king eiders, but we do see them in certain places. We know where to see them, where to expect them. So early in the season.
Great. I had another question, yes, about the binoculars. If you have any information about which which type of binoculars could be the most interesting, or
I think nowadays, if you spend a certain amount of money, it doesn't have to be too much, then the binoculars are fine. So I would say every binocular from 100 euros or more is okay. There are binoculars up to 1,000 or 2,000 euros, but that's only for those that use them a lot. Mm-hmm. And they are, of course, much better, the optics, and they might be better waterproof. So it depends, do you buy them only for one trip, or do you buy them for the rest of your life? If it's the rest of your life, then it's an investment, and I would say spend a few hundred euros. And then there are several brands like Steiner or all kinds of brands that you can buy for 300-400 euros. You can buy great binoculars, but the cheaper ones start at 100 euros that are okay for one trip in a way. When they're waterproof, it's better than if you have the really cheap ones. The optics are not good, they're not waterproof, so they might get moist or water in there, and then they're useless. So spend rather a bit more than less on binoculars, I would say, but it depends on how you're going to use them. If it's only for one time, yeah, I do understand you do not spend too much money on it. Does that answer your question?
Probably. The last question I will take, because it's a relevant one, well, an important one. Someone asking about seasickness, which is probably more of an issue in Antarctica, less in Svalbard. But maybe you have something to add about that.
Yeah. Indeed, the Drake Passage, Antarctica, that's where people get seasick very often. Some of you might have the experience. In the north, you don't sail across a huge stretch of water. You fly to Spitsbergen and you stay in the fjords most of the time. Our new ships all have active stabilizers, the Hondius and Jansonius. The other ships, like Rembrandt, of course, not that much. They don't have active stabilizers, so they might roll more. But still, the chance of getting seasick in Spitsbergen is not that high. If it happens, it might be very short, that we're just out of the fjords. And if it's a bit more rough, the ships might roll a bit more, but it's only short. And during the night, you will be more sheltered quickly. So I normally would say in Spitsbergen, it's not really an issue, especially not on the bigger ships. And if you do not feel well, it's only for a short moment. The thing is, like patches, seasickness tablets, they also have side effects. So if you take them, the side effects might be worse than the bad feeling that you might have. In Antarctica, it might be worthwhile because you're 2 days at the Drake Passage. But here, the side effects might make it worse for you. And yeah, so I rather say do not take anything, or only pills. Never take the patches in the north because they last too long and they might give you things that you don't want, like these side effects. So you might take a pill if you do not feel well. You can take them with you, ask advice. On the motor ships, we have doctors on board, or ask the crew on the Rembrandt and they can advise you. But normally it's not necessary at all. We do offer seasickness tablets on board also, but it's always better to ask your own doctor or pharmacist for it, because they have more experience on your situation.
Perfect. Well, we are at the end of the presentation. I will thank you again, Jan, because it was great presentation, very informative. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for your attention and staying with us until now. And I hope sincerely to see you very soon on one of our vessels.
Would you like to talk a bit about the next slide still, or?
Well, we are at the end. Well, I will send a mailing now to all of you, including more information about, including a video, for example, and also with the recording of the entire webinar. So, thank you. Have a nice evening, and hope to see you soon. Bye.